Hey, how's it going, Stephanie?
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so you are amazing. You are one of the most talented editors today, not just in film, but also in television. And I mean, you're the only editor that I know that has gotten 3 Emmys in the same year. So it is an honor to be able to talk with you. So first, we're going to go ahead and talk about your film, We Grow Now. I want you to kind of tell me, how did you get connected to Mihal's feature film? Like, what ended up being the connector for you guys? Like, did you guys already know each other? Like, what ended up happening that you got connected to that project?
Well, you know what's funny is the way that we met was via Twitter. Um, I had seen her original or her prior film called Hala, and
Mhm.
she was a huge fan of a Black Lady sketch show. Um, and so we just simultaneously, I think, were like fans of each other from afar. And so, one day she followed me and I was like, oh my God, oh my God. So we were kind of just like, I think, admiring each other from afar and interacted, kind of from afar via Twitter. One day she had reached out and sent the script for this. Um, and I read it and just like I feel like so many different emotions reading it. It took me to so many different places and brought back so many memories of my own childhood. And, I'm just like, I have to be involved somehow in this. By the end of the script, I was just sobbing. There's a moment in there as well. Um, there's like the museum scene in the film, and that to me, just because I have such a like one of my favorite movies ever is Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and that
Yes.
sequence in there, but it was so special because it was like retelling it in a way that we see a lot of these like 1980s and 90s Chicago movies just through the lens of sort of like privileged white teenagers. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but it's like we don't have something from our own perspective, from the perspective of young Black children. So it was just something really exciting, I think, reading it. And so immediately when I finished that script, I was like, you know what, I have to like, I don't know what I have to do, but I want to work on this film. Um, and so I interviewed with her. We just had a Zoom and talked about the script and what my thoughts were and what her thoughts were and kind of her goals with it. Um, and shortly after, she sent like a long letter about why she felt like I was the exact right person to join her in telling this. Um, and I was also just like, well, I would have done it anyway without this letter, but I appreciated just I think we just appreciated each other a lot. And they were doing post in New York, which, I live in LA. So,
Mhm.
I moved across country to work on it. I felt really that this was such a special project that I wanted to be part of. So it was just a cool meeting, but also just I think it just felt serendipitous, our connection for it.
Yeah, no, that actually kind of leads into this follow-up question I was going to ask, was really kind of like, were you on site with the crew while they were filming? And I mean, I know that Pat was the DP for it and he has some amazing imagery in it, but like, what was the structural preparation for it? Like, did she already have like a shot or storyboard that she kind of wanted in mind of how she wanted the scenes to flow? Like, what did it look like for you guys working with Pat for preparation on how this was going to actually look?
Yeah, so it's not always that as an editor you get brought in kind of in pre-production stage, and it was really nice that she involved me in that, and we kind of had some meetings about the story and structure, but more importantly, how to like tell this through the boys' perspective.
Mhm.
Um, so we talked about kind of the scenes, especially like the sort of tentpole scenes that were like, we know these need to be like nailed as much as possible. Um, and I know in meetings and prep, her and Pat had like their thing going. And I know they at the end of the film, you see a lot of photos
Mhm.
over our credit or under our credits. And they're by, I think the photographer is Mark Pokempner. So they use that a lot as kind of like a visual language, I think, in the film, and trying to figure out, I guess, just angles and ways to tell this from like the boy's perspective in particular. And so I wasn't on set with them, but what happened was Pat, who is incredible, like he shot so many of these really unique, interesting angles that were kind of like pointing upwards, almost like you're down where the kids are and like looking up at the world. And it kind of made me edit in that way, you know. It kind of brought me into this headspace as well. So it was while they were filming, you know, I would send the scenes at the end of each day. I would try to stay as caught up to them filming on set, and then I would send Minhal the just a quick assembly of it, you know, not super polished or anything, but just here's what it looks like. Is this, you know, do you feel like you got everything? And just it was a way for us to kind of talk about if she needed any additional coverage before they lost that location. So it was very like collaborative, even though I wasn't there on set. It was still a way to kind of send my thoughts and ideas. And I knew from her other film, Hala, she really loves kind of holding on longer shots and moments and like really feeling a part of those intimate moments. So I really tried to just stay with kind of that approach, you know, and obviously we dialed it in later once she was done shooting and we were in the full edit. But you know, I think during their process of filming, it was really about just trying to stay on top of the footage as it came in and making sure that they had what they needed.
No, I think that's really good because I was gonna actually bring up like Pat's like imagery style. Like I don't know what it is, but the camera feels like it's always just naturally moving, except for when it's like tied in with the kid, like whichever child. Like when it focuses and just kind of sits for a second, and then it's kind of just progressively moving up or moving a different direction. But I think that made the movie flow so naturally in the way you edited it. But that was the other thing I was going to ask is about like reshoots. Like, what if there was needing, like, you're like, oh man, we need this one of the shots. So because they let you stay in on the pre-production, you were able to kind of add like, okay, if there's another shot, we might need to do this here before they kind of left the location. Is that correct?
Yeah. And you know what was actually really lucky in our case was that they did have one additional pickups day slated that they did a couple weeks into the edit. So by the time Minhal was there and we were working on her director's cut, we had kind of like sifted through everything. We had been working on everything. And so we could say, you know, we really could use like this one additional like piece of this scene here. And it was nice that we were able to do it during her director's cut because it gave us time to play with it. I think a lot of times pickups happen much later. But in this instance, it was like in the middle of the director's cut, we were able to at least get some things in there. And it felt like we were able to really polish the story because of it. But luckily, you know, we had so much already. And Pat is such an incredible, just an amazing cinematographer. Like if I could work on every project for the rest of time with just Pat, that would be my dream. He's amazing. But, you know, something I think he did that was so special about this project was, you know, you think about a project about young boys in Cabrini-Green in the projects, and like I feel like we've gotten so many iterations of like, oh, here's like a gritty version. It should be handheld and gritty and like grainy, and you know what I mean? Like I feel like we see that a lot, and I thought it was so special that he brought like this warmth and kind of like childlike joy to the imagery. You know, it felt like you could actually, it felt relatable, and it wasn't like, oh, this is like speaking down to the Black experience. It felt like we were just with the boys, and I just thought that was so like awesome that he was able to kind of capture that feeling.
I swear you're either reading my mind or reading my questions before I get to them. Because the next thing I was going to bring up was, you know, both the leads, well, both the characters, Eric and Malik. The thing about it that's so amazing is they keep and maintain this positivity throughout the film. And they have this naivete about them, but they have this childlike innocence at the same time. But throughout the course of the film, there are certain moments, whether it's like, you know, parents talking or a news report or something that's happened that slowly progresses them to like this little bit of sadness of reality. And I think that the way that it's shot and the way that it's edited, you can feel it, even down to like when there's the beginning of the movie where it's like the Pledge of Allegiance, like, you know, you're a kid, you have that moment, you remember those moments. But progressively, like there's another moment the Pledge of Allegiance happens. It's like this, just like what are we putting our hands on this for? Like, what does this mean for us as a people when we got stuff going on here? And I mean, you brought it up, but I was really going to ask, like, with you working through that from an editing standpoint with the director, with Pat, how did y'all work through those moments, and making sure that they kind of felt natural and at the same as that time eye catching? Because I think that it connects with me, but it may not connect with everybody else. You know what I'm saying? So I think you guys did it, but I wanted to see if you could talk towards that a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's one of the more interesting exercises in working on this movie, because it's so much of it is like a slice of life movie, right? Like you're really just supposed to feel like almost like a fly on the wall experiencing the world with these boys. So a lot of what we did was like just like reminisce about our own childhoods in a way where it's like um when I was a kid, if something was happening around me, say I'm tiny and I'm next to like my mom and someone else is talking, I'm like looking up to my mom. I'm not looking at this other person. You know what I mean? So there's scenes where, there's the ID card sequence where they come home and the police are like saying, everyone, all the residents of Cabrini-Green need to have ID cards. There's footage of the police officers, and we played with that as well. But I think it was about finding like what the headspace of 2 10-year-old boys would be, right? So it's like when I was that age, I was like looking at my parents, or looking at the other kids around me and not looking at this like stranger at all, just kind of like trying to understand the world with the other people trying to figure it out with me, if that makes sense. And so a lot of I think our process was just trying to figure those moments out. A lot of times when the adults are talking, it's almost like, in Charlie Brown, you hear like the teacher in the background. Yeah, it's almost it's almost that effect in a way, because it's like just trying to live with the kids and what their experience is, but also seeing, you mentioned the Pledge of Allegiance moments. It's like seeing how the world slowly starts to change for them. Little things start happening around them that slowly start to chip away at like the way that they're experiencing the world. So even though it's like they're still joyful young boys, they have to feel these little shifts. And so, it just in thinking back to our own childhoods at 10, what were those moments, and kind of reflecting on how, I guess, how we would have experienced them or how we would have even reacted. And, are there any like big moments that make you just, that shift is instantaneous? I think for Eric in particular, the raid scene kind of, that's it for him. And that's, for Malik, he becomes much more like pensive and thoughtful and not quite as joyful as he was. So it's just kind of, yeah, I think the process of finding that was really just figuring out again what those big moments would be, and then figuring out how they would adapt over time, and figuring out what the length of time would be, because I think we start in, fall of 1992. And I know Dan Trell died, I think, in October of 1992. And then by the end of the movie, we're in the spring. So it's really this period of time, and how kids shift over that time.
Yeah, no, it's so interesting because it's not that you guys' movie pairs with this other movie, but it's just so specific to dealing with what we have to deal with as a people. There's another movie that I recently saw called The Nickel Boys. And with the Nickel Boys, like they literally shoot the film through the lens of the characters. And throughout everything that's going on, this is based on true story, 105 years worth of like torment to a people, so to speak, in the Dozer schools in the academy that's in Florida. And the way that they kind of handle it, it's just so real and visceral, but they give these moments that you feel their humanity through their innocence, but then the life is just keep rotating, and you guys' movies are paired so well, because I think that from a normal person's lens that's just watching a movie, they're like, this may be something that I connect with, maybe I don't, but you guys make it very connectable, and I think that's very important for a climate right now, especially. So I just want to commend you on that. But I did want to ask you about something. What was the hardest? And maybe you don't want to answer this. You don't have to. What was the hardest scene or scenes to edit, and why? Because again, this movie is a lot. It's amazing, but it's a lot. So you've been exposed to quite a bit, TV and film. But in this film specifically, what was the hardest moment or hardest scenes to edit?
There were a few different ones for different reasons. So I think the obvious two would be the raid sequence and also the ID card sequence. But it's not just because of the like what's happening in the scenes. I think it's also something that we like really took great effort in trying to build out was the soundscape of the space. And so when you think about Cabrini-Green, that's, there's a couple towers, there's 16 floors each, and it's thinking about what each floor, like what the sound should be on each floor, what would be happening. So, by the end, we had a certain number of audio track, like 50 audio tracks, and we're like, on this floor, this is happening. On this floor, this is happening. But what we did for the raid and for the ID card sequences was, when you're building out temp sound libraries, you don't always have like realistic sounding things. And something that we did in the edit that was actually just, I think, emotionally like trying for both of us was we pulled actual raid audio off of YouTube. We found like actual police raid videos. We had actual like police videos. And so we had those layered in there as we were building out the scenes. And so I think just from an emotional standpoint, like it was a lot just to try to make it feel as like you're in that world as you can be, because so much of this movie is like a very intimate and like seeing it through their point of view film, that it's like we just felt it was so important to build at least like the blueprint of what that should feel like. And so those were hard for that reason. Another scene that was not hard, but it was something we actually created in post in like the second to last day of the edit was there's a final prayer scene with Eric. That didn't exist before. So through our entire edit, we're like, we feel like we need kind of a closure moment for Eric. You have Malik has his essay that he writes in class. And we've kind of been within his perspective for so much of this film. But a lot of this film is like you hear kind of repeating thoughts through different people's lenses, So Malik talks about his house with the tomatoes, with the 2 stories, and so that's Malik's side of it, and we're like, we don't have what Eric's perspective is here, and we need Eric to feel like he is okay, like he's almost come up with like a resolution for it all. And he had struggled so much, I think, with religion and like thoughts of the afterlife throughout the movie, and so by the, we're like, how do we give him like a final little moment? And so we're like, if we have these little beats with other people, what if Eric has his own? So we built out this sort of prayer sequence. We had the prayer scene, which had a totally different intention before. But we're like, what if it's Eric? It was originally more the Dolores and Anita characters praying about the future. We're like, what if Eric is praying about his friend? Why can Eric not have that little closure moment? So that one, it wasn't a challenge per se. It was more in finding what we wanted to do for that character. So it was an interesting kind of like last minute find that we had. But I think one of our favorite sequences in the movie because it feels like it kind of connects all the last pieces.
No, that's actually really, man, the fact that that was added in post is actually really interesting. Because even like, no, I'm not gonna go deep. No, I'm gonna shut up. That was great. It was really good. I was just thinking back to when the first prayer that was happening with the family, and they kind of modeled it and talked about their grandfather, and why are we talking about grandfather like he would have been this age, and like the importance of it. So it's just it all interconnects back. So this is really good. Um, so I did want to talk to you about your other things that you work on, which is also television. I mean, you do documentaries, you do television, you do film. Um, there are certain projects that you've worked on that seems like it's really rough. But I think the thing I was going to really ask you about more so was, as an editor, is it more gratifying for you to work on a series or on a film? And I mean, I guess it kind of depends, but I wanted your personal perspective on it. And I have a follow-up question to that.
I think for me, it just depends on the story. I don't know that I have like a preference for film or for TV. It's more like I want to make sure that I work on stories that I feel connected to. And also something that I don't think that we talk about enough as editors is like the ethics of telling a story, and also what the social impact of telling a story is. And so that's something that I've always tried to kind of focus on any project that I choose, whether it's a documentary or a documentary series or narrative series. I kind of just go for things that I feel like maybe this is an underrepresented voice, or maybe there's like a different way that we could tell this story. So a project like a Black Lady sketch show and Dahmer on the surface are very, very different. However, a Black Lady sketch show is a very like, it's an underrepresented community, because when you think about how Black women are usually portrayed in comedy, there's like a very stereotypical version of what a Black woman is. And it's so special, or it was so special to see hundreds of different versions of Black women every season, and a way to kind of bring joy to people that deserve it. You know what I mean? Like, it was just a really special experience. And also just seeing the teams on those projects. Like, I've never in my life seen an entirely Black post team. It took me like 10 years before I even met another Black editor, but then to see a whole post team that is a Black post team, and like a whole crew, like a Black lady grip department, and Black lady hairstylists, and like it was so special in that way. And then I think for a show like Dahmer, it's a story that's been so sensationalized over the years that at first I was scared to work on, like hesitant to work on something like that. And when I read the scripts and understood what they were trying to do, it felt very like something I wanted to be a part of, trying to tell the story in a different way, and maybe trying to shed light on why these injustices happened, and it is a way to kind of, as an editor, you're really the final rewrite of any script. So it's a chance to kind of, again, think about like the ethics of anything, and the social impact of anything that you're working on, and then a story like We Grown Now, like it's so special to just see Black boy joy in this way. Like, why don't little Black boys have art house features? Like, we don't see that, why, that in itself just felt really special, and felt like a new way of telling a story like this. So that's usually, kind of, it's maybe a long-winded way of answering that, but I think, rather than saying, oh, I like documentaries more or features more, or, it's more just about, I just like stories that I feel like I can put myself into them, but also can bring maybe like a different perspective or a social impact perspective too.
Yeah, we may have to have a separate discussion about a movie called Exhibiting Forgiveness. I'm gonna say that for another time. We'll leave that alone.
I still have to
Um,
watch that one.
but no, my follow up was really just asking about: is there a difference in man hours worked, like between like a series versus film? Because again, you've done documentaries, you've done like anthology series, you've done short films, you've done features. So is there a true difference in the amount of man hours it's going to take for you to edit something versus a series versus an episode or versus like a film? Like, what does that really look like realistically?
The timeline in television is usually a lot more condensed.
Hmm.
It kind of depends, I guess, on the project, but a lot of times it's more condensed because you have like an air date that you're trying to reach, you know? So you're like,
Mm.
okay, by this day I need this, by this date I need to have this much, you know, and you have that final air date. But yeah, it kind of varies. Honestly, I to me, the biggest editor's medium is documentaries, and that's because you usually are working with thousands of hours of footage,
Footage.
know,
Yeah.
thousands and thousands, and also you're usually the person constructing what that story is, right? So it's, you know, you're not coming into it with here's already a script and here's takes and here's, you know, you're trying to mold something out of thousands and thousands of hours. So, and that's another one that feels like the ethical responsibility is so high because a lot of times, you know, sure there are more upbeat docs, but a lot of times it's like a story that, you know, someone's maybe pouring their heart out to you and you're responsible for telling that story correctly. So I think on an emotional level, maybe documentaries take more out of me. But yeah, I don't know that there's a difference really. Like I couldn't say that any of those have like a palpable number of man hours that are different than the other. It really just kind of depends on if there's is there like an air date or a day that you have to deliver it by. That's usually what that's usually what dictates. If it's like we need this tomorrow, then then that's gonna change your man hours for sure.
I guess that makes sense because even like with stuff that like I have to, do like this interview, for instance, like if somebody was like, "Hey, I need this interview by December the 15th," it's like, crap, I'm not gonna sleep tonight. So I guess that makes sense. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But the segue to that is actually, I mean, I look at the editor as the playmaker. And I mean, a lot of films, in my opinion, live and die by somebody saying no, somebody saying, oh, maybe this might be a little bit overfilled, maybe this is underconnected. And the editor, whether or not, the director allows it, whether or not the studio allows it, can make or break how a film can truly transform into something different. And I think that those real modifications and working relationship with the crew leave an impact on every film and every series. But I was going to ask your opinion on that sentiment. How do you believe that? Do you feel that, as an editor, that is the actual lasting impact on entertainment media, or is there a little bit deeper thought to that from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, obviously every project's different, but I think that's one of the things that I find the most special about what I do is the fact that you get to collaborate with people day in and day out on something. I think there's kind of this perspective that, oh, editors sit in a dark room on their own all day, every day by themselves, but that's actually not at all what my job is. You know, my job is trying to, you know, someone said we're the guardians of the story the other day, and I really liked that. It's like
That's dope.
it makes us sound like the Avengers, but like, but it's true though because ultimately my job is taking the intention of maybe what was written or what was, you know, pitched and trying to make sure that the final product matches that, you know, and sometimes maybe on set like they don't have enough time to film a scene or there's certain things that aren't there. So it's like my job ultimately is to try to match what like the director's intentions are with what you see on screen. And that collaboration to me is the greatest thing because it's, you know, if you're working with some like Minhal and I have a great working relationship in that like we push each other all the time where she's like try this and I'm like there's no way that would work but I'll hear and then I'm like oh yeah it does actually work or we'll be working on something and I'm like there's no like this doesn't make sense like I really think we should try this and like we just sit and try things together and play like move cards around on the wall, like story cards, and try to figure out the best way to tell something. And that to me is like what's the most exciting about what I do, is just being able to work with people and collaborate and try to make something the best it can be, and sometimes you have more or less of a voice. It just depends on the project. But I think, for the most part, people are usually very receptive to, like, if as an editor I'm saying like this, oh, this doesn't make sense, we need to work on this, usually people are receptive to that. And I think, it's really an edit bay is really a safe space to like talk and work on these things.
Yeah. I mean, I guess sometimes as an editor, and I'm not speaking from experience, it can be a tireless, thankless job sometimes. Sometimes you spend days or hours or years editing something, and it may not, I mean, the finished product may just not be noticed at all, but you find value and love in it. And sometimes it's completely praised out of nowhere and it just catches you off guard. How do you deal with that emotional flux of how much time, no matter how long or how much you pour into it, at the end of the day, at the cutting room floor, it just up in the air where it's going to lie? But how do you deal with that emotionally, one way or another?
It's terrifying, honestly, always for me. Because I'm always like, I don't like, obviously you put so much energy into it, but as like a creative person, you're in such a vulnerable place,
Mm-hmm.
so it's kind of like, yeah, you're once it's out, once something premieres, like once, for example, once We Grown Now premiered, Minhal and I both like looked at each other and we're like, it's not ours anymore. Like now we'll see what people, see what people think of it. So it's really, it's a vulnerable place, but it's also, I really enjoy like watching people react to anything, that I've worked on. And I think it's also important to realize that, sometimes impact is greater than intent, and
Mm-hmm.
figuring out what, on some projects, what hits in different ways, and who reacts to it in different ways. And, it's interesting, but it is a very vulnerable place. And I don't know that I've ever like come to a good I don't know that I have any good ways of navigating it. I'm usually just very anxious, and like if it's a public premiere, usually I'm like staring at the audience like, are they gonna like it? I hope
What are they thinking? Oh my
so.
gosh. I mean, just to give you a word of encouragement, I think, and I had the conversation with Titus about exhibiting forgiveness. From a distribution standpoint, sometimes like it's not high or available to have high marketing and distribution for people to everybody to be able to see it. But I think that your devotion and the work you put into it is going to leave a lasting impact regardless of someone. And at the end of the day, like if it's something that's made with that much passion and devotion, if it makes an impact, regardless if it gets accolades or not, that's a blessing. So I think that stay encouraged with whatever you work, whatever amount of time or years you work on it, it's gonna hit regardless. So just be encouraged with that.
Thank you. I mean, that is the ultimate dream, is just, I hope that it reaches people who, are understand what we're trying to do and like it. And, that's the dream. I saw myself in the script. Like, I just hope other people see themselves in the story, and, for this, but for anything I work on, just, I hope people see the care that's put into something.
They're gonna see it. They're gonna see it. But I did want to talk about that because you really do care a lot. You
Too
are a human
much.
rights activist, and you specifically, care about the rights of women and girls, young girls. And I was gonna ask, like, from all the different programs that you're connected to and different campaigns you're connected to, how did that come to be? And also, like, in the climate that we're in right now, how much even more important are that passion, more so than anything else that you're doing, you feel like is important right now? So how did you get connected to all these specific things as being an activist and campaigns, but also how do you feel like it's so much more needed right now?
Well, my dad is a human rights attorney, so I grew up around, and he's worked a lot with like the UN and international courts and stuff. So he, I kind of grew up around watching that and kind of seeing, I guess, getting like a first eye or a fly on the wall perspective of that, and just seeing how important it is to kind of like important just to care, but also just to try to push for others, and try to fight for causes that you care about, even if you're not part of them. Like, you just have to try to push, if you're not reflected in that group, you still have to fight for the said groups. So it's, I think, I grew up watching that, and I think from a young age just always tried to get involved in that kind of stuff. And I'm trying to remember the very first kind of campaign I started on, but it was I think I did a few like UN campaigns, helping just with like video stuff when I was younger, and then it kind of evolved over time, and now I work with Girls Empowerment Sierra Leone, which is an organization for girls age 11 to 16 in Sierra Leone, and it's a year-round program for girls to learn kind of leadership skills, but also learning about activism and advocacy in their communities. So, throughout the year, they will do different community impact projects. They identify something that maybe they want to address within their community, and then they'll spend the year trying to speak publicly, sensitize their communities, and teach them about these different issues that are important to them. And so I've been involved in that for, this is our 12th year. We started 12 years ago. So yeah, I try to just stay involved in whatever I can, and whichever campaigns I can. I still do produce social impact stuff with the UN or outside of the UN, a grassroots organization stuff. So I just try to stay active. And I think in this time that we're in, it's like it's just critical for us to be, I think it's the knee-jerk reaction is to just be exhausted and to like sit back and not do anything, because it's like, well, will any of this matter? But without any of those voices, it won't matter. You know what I mean? Like, we need to be as vocal as we can in times like this, and vocal for groups that maybe we're not part of, but that it's important that we speak up on their behalf as well. I think we're going to see a lot of troubling things in the coming years, and I just think it's really important for us to stay vigilant. And we'll see industry wise, film and television wise, even if you're not part of a campaign or part of something, any PSA or grassroots organizations, I think artistically it's important for us to be telling stories that maybe showcase underrepresented voices, because those are the voices that need to be heard the most. So I'm hopeful that people will try to, start, or not start, but keep producing content that's, that speaks to these communities that are going to be impacted more so than anything.
No, I think that's really important, and I completely agree with that sentiment. And I mean, unfortunately and fortunately, the state of our world is crazy, and it just keeps getting more and more real, to the point that sometimes film, television is so much like, it's almost a direct parallel. Like, wow, this is exactly what's going on. Like, if you look at a show like The Boys, as fantastical and outrageous as it is, some people looking like, oh wait, this is kind of similar to what's going on right now. And you yourself have done a whole range of different things in comedy, drama, documentaries, and even action. But there are moments where you have like these lighthearted projects, and then sometimes you have these darker projects. Emotionally, navigating, editing some of that stuff. And then maybe it doesn't affect you. I mean, I don't want to presume that it does, but I'm just going to ask the question: does some of that, digesting that and piecing some of those together, connected moments, or I don't know, things that are even similar to right now, does that lay heavy on you at times? Is that something that's a little hard emotionally to navigate?
Yeah, it's I mean, I use Dahmer as an example because that's like it's a very heavy project, but that was one where, obviously as an editor, you're sitting in front of a screen looking at stuff like this for like 12 hours a day. Um, and so something that to me is always really important is like protecting my headspace working on anything like that. Much like on We Grow Now, the heavier sequences as well. If something if I know something is gonna take a huge emotional toll on me, it's like I have to figure out a way to manage my time a little bit with it.
Mm,
Um, so thinking of Dahmer, for example, the victim impact statement scene is something that I've seen since the 90s. When it happened, it's something that's haunted me because it exists on YouTube and we've seen the actual footage of it. And so when I knew that that was an episode that I was working on, like I had to figure out a way. I was like, how do I pace out how I edit this? And I knew I just had to get it right. And so for that, I had the dailies, and I didn't touch that scene for a while. Like I looked at what the footage looked like, and then I looked at the YouTube footage, and then I went to something else. I was like, I need to go work on something else. And then just when I wake up one day, I'm gonna have like the emotional reserves to do it, and that's the day I'm gonna focus on it. So I kind of just each day would kind of like look at the footage, look at the real footage, and then look at other different things instead until I was ready. And that's kind of what happened, on We Grow Now with, for example, the raid sequence with like I was saying, the YouTube audio and stuff like that. It's like I think Minhal and I are both like very aware of where each other emotionally kind of are. So it's like if she could sense that like, oh, this is going to be a tough one, maybe let's jump to a different scene for a little and then come back to it. So we would kind of lean on each other in that way. In documentary world, I would kind of do the same thing as well. Surviving R. Kelly, a very heavy documentary, but it's like I would have to like go take walks or think about different, just think about different things when you can. Obviously, for that you can't step away because every moment is about the same topic. But it's going to take like a walk or have a conversation with someone or listen to music or something. Just usually will also help because it does. As an editor, it does really emotionally hit you. And if what you've been doing is like working, then you're trying to maximize these emotions, and so you're really
mhm.
just sitting with it for a really long stretch. So it is important to try to find those like balance moments when you can and try to, I don't know, go outside and touch grass a little bit, like something.
Yeah, I was literally about to ask this because I was like, I mean, I can imagine you kind of like just stepping away for a second, just going to the beach and just like letting like the water hit your feet or something like that. So that immediately makes sense. I was that was the other question I was gonna ask is like, what were some of the things you did? But stepping away, taking a moment, taking a breather. And I mean, I can only imagine if you're working on multiple different projects at once, and it's kind of just like you got a deadline for this project, but then you got something else. So no, that's good. That's interesting to know.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, this has been a great interview. Thank you for talking with me. I do have some follow up questions at the end, but I guess the first one is, what are your future projects? What are you working on next? And I guess the lead off to that question, if you can tell me those things that you're working on, what is something that you haven't gotten to do yet that you always wanted to do and you're interested in?
Oh, wow.
Those are my two questions so far.
Well, I have a couple things on the way. So I'm finishing up a feature called Horse Girls. It's also kind of highlights an underrepresented community. So I'm excited for that to come out soon. And then another project with Disney that I can't tell you about yet, but I'm very excited about, and it will be out in March, I believe.
We are definitely talking after this, off the record.
And then something that I want to do. I don't. It's hard. I'm not good at those questions. You know why? Because they're like, oh, what do you want to do in 5 years from now, in 10 years from now? I don't know, and I like to bounce around so much between genres and stories, and I really just want to tell stories that I care about with people that I care about. So whatever that means, we will see. And it's a Libra answer, but it's
But no, you've earned whatever answer you've given me. So I appreciate it. You are again the GOAT. You are amazing. I mean, so many different accolades, so many different things that you've done. And I think it's not just the fact of you like winning like a change maker award or audience choice award or anything like that. Like it's more so you to me are encouraging us as a people, like not just through entertainment media, but who you are. And I think that there's a fearlessness with how you approach it. And I think there's a love and care and devotion to it as well. And I think people see it in We Grow Now, people see it in, of course, Dahmer, and people will see it with whatever future things that you work on. So I just want you to be encouraged, and I want to give you your flowers because I appreciate the work that you put in. I mean, again, we met at the Light Reel Awards festival, and I was like, whoa, this person is amazing. I can't wait to like talk to them at some point. And I'm just thankful that you thought enough to be able to have the interview with me. So I appreciate you.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah. I have, go ahead. What were you going to say? What were you going to say? I'm sorry.
No, I just said I appreciate it. I'm honored.
Oh, no. Thank you. The last thing I was going to say is I'm going to give you some recommendations of movies to watch.
Please
and
do.
This is not me trying to push you into a certain genre. These just happen to be anime films.
Love anime. What you got?
I want you to check out an anime series called Erased.
Erased, okay.
I want you to check out an anime film called A Silent Voice. And I want you to check out a movie by Hayao Miyazaki called The Wind Rises. And each of these specific stories, film and series, are amazingly edited. And I think that the way that you edit, I think that I would love to see something animated that you'd work on. That's just something that I would hope. I'm gonna leave it at that.
Yeah, I'm intrigued. I just wrote all these down, so I'm gonna watch.
Yeah, but no, thank you so much, Stephanie. This has been amazing. We went a little over long than I anticipated. I apologize for keeping you too long.
No problem.
You guys go and check out We Grow Now. Go check out her IMDb page. I'll put it in the description bar below, and I'll also give you guys a biography on Stephanie, who's amazing. Thank you guys so much for watching. We'll talk to you guys later. Peace, everybody.
Thank you.